Alright guys, hope you're doing well. My name's Rowlands, I'm a nutritional balancing practitioner, and here I am in nature, out working. You can just see my tent there. So I just basically pitch up my tent, look at that lovely view, do my work all day. That tends to provide many different things for me. Just being out in nature is really helpful, and no distractions, and breathing in the fresh air, seeing the animals, seeing the nature. You know, it's what life's all about, really. If you kind of look at most healing modalities, what you'll generally find is that actually what they're trying to do is get you back in touch with where we've come from, whether it be eating organic or drinking spring water or grounding, earthing, you know, getting away from electromagnetic stress, all that sort of stuff. Basically, they're just trying to get you back in touch with nature. But there's a taboo around rewilding, there's a taboo around going backwards, because without that taboo we wouldn't live in this consumeristic, materialistic sort of realm. Anyway, in this video I'm going to talk about something, big word, what everyone talks about: trauma. Interesting. We deal with trauma really interestingly in nutrition balancing. It makes sense and it works. I've seen it work with my clients, I've seen it work with me. It does work, and hopefully I'll explain it a little bit now, what trauma is, and how to get rid of it in the best way, I think. So what is trauma? Well, trauma's anything that shocks you as an individual. So sometimes it's very individualistic trauma. You know, you might be in a, you know, it might be something small. You might be in a classroom when you're 5, 6, 7, and the teacher just says something to you that you just don't like. I remember one teacher once called me a sissy, and that stuck with me, really stuck with me. Didn't like that whatsoever. But it's individualised. For some people it wouldn't be traumatic, for others it will be. But when you think about little children, babies for example, whenever they receive trauma, whether it be they fall over, they get angry about something, how do they process it? They scream, shout, cry, they get it out. That's what trauma is. Trauma's this energy that comes in that affects your whole being. So think of it like a frequency. This frequency comes in, a low vibrational frequency that comes into your body, and it affects you. And for you to deal with that trauma, for the body to deal with that trauma, you've kind of got to reflect back out the same frequency that's coming in, the same frequency that you're feeling, or the same frequency that your mind starts to generate after you've heard something. So let's say you fall down and hurt yourself, for example. That low frequency of hurt comes out and you scream, shout, cry. That's the way of getting over it. It's the body's response. It's a little bit like balance. Think of it like karma. Bad things come in, you've got to have to respond, and it comes back out again. I'm trying to explain this a little bit because this is what's going to make you understand how trauma works and how to get rid of it. But as you get older, society tells you to hold on to this stuff, to not cry, especially, well, not especially for everyone, but a lot of guys, for example, if you want to start getting specific, are taught not to cry, not to show emotion, not to show this, not to show that. You know, you're in school, you need to be quiet. 5, 6, 7-year-old kids, be quiet, sit down, do this, do that. Or a parent shouts at you and you don't respond. So what happens is you get these frequencies coming in, this trauma, and because it's come in, it's affected you. But if you don't respond by whatever means that necessary to get it off your chest, then it gets stuck inside your body. Very fascinating process. And this frequency actually starts to manifest physically, a trauma physically in the body. And what generally happens is the body will actually surround the trauma with toxins. Very, very fascinating process. Toxins are a low vibrational frequency, and often that's why the body protects it with this low vibration. It's like a shield. And it happens in the brain as well. You get a trauma, someone calls you a name, abuse is a big one, obviously. If you get abused, you know, all that abuse gets stuck inside of you, gets stuck inside your mind, and the brain has to deal with it somehow. If you can't respond by fighting, by speaking to someone, by seeing a counsellor, by just responding with whatever energy comes in, you've got to have the opposite to try and get it all out. It'll get stuck inside the system. Now, another important factor which often happens is the body actually needs energy to deal with trauma. So when the body is not feeling well, it starts to shut down the things that are not made for survival. So crying, for example, is shut down in a lot of people. Crying's not a survival mechanism, but it does take up a lot of energy, you know. So you might get hit by a trauma, and to respond to that, a good thing for the body to do is to cry, is to get it off your chest, get it out of the mind. As you can see, crying is this physical form of water dropping down through the eyes. It's this mental, you know, it's the energy of the mental coming out physically. But if the body hasn't got the energy to do that, the energy to respond with crying, it gets stuck inside. And this is what happens for a lot of people. They'll either receive a trauma and they can't speak about it, they can't respond for whatever reason. Abuse is a common one, rape, for example, and the person keeps hold of it, keeps a lid on it, and they get stuck inside the system. And then there's another type whereby the person can respond, they're in a position where they probably can respond, but the body doesn't have the energy to do it. The body actually needs energy to do all this stuff. The body needs energy to feel depressed, believe it or not. Actually, when a lot of people begin the program and they give the body nourishment, they start to feel more depressed sometimes, and they don't understand why, and it's because the body has the energy to actually feel emotion, to feel what's going off in the body. Very, very fascinating. So, once you've got trauma, well, how do you deal with it? Well, there's many different ways of dealing with trauma, but the way that nutritional balancing specifically deals with trauma is a lot differently, but it's the real way to deal with trauma, in my opinion. So first it's important to realise that the body has mechanisms to deal with trauma. Look at the best way to understand this is look at how a baby reacts to trauma. They cry, they get angry, they scream, they punch, they kick, and this is the body's natural response to dealing with trauma. It's an energetic input, a physical output. And so basically what happens is when you give the body nourishment, when you give the body what it needs, what will happen is the body will start to push out this trauma that's stuck inside in its own order, depending on the body's very wise, and what will happen is you give the nourishment the body needs and the trauma will come out. All of a sudden a person might just start crying, all of a sudden a person gets super angry, all of a sudden the person just wants to punch someone or punch the bed, or emotions come up, flashbacks of a rape, flashbacks of abuse, flashbacks of when that teacher said something to you, or when that football coach mentioned something about how you play. And this is confusing to people. Why, doing the program, why is this happening? Well, this is the process of trauma retracing. Very, very fascinating process. And if you remember what I mentioned earlier, trauma is usually attached to a toxin. This is the case. So usually what happens as well is a person not only will retrace a trauma, but also they'll also retrace, toxins will come out of the system as well. So they'll have a toxin release and a toxic, they'll have healing reactions. Now a lot of the times people sometimes forget about traumas. They can't even consciously remember it. So sometimes, it's just important when a trauma comes out, or you feel angry, or you feel you want to scream, or you want to cry, or you just get these weird dreams or weird thoughts about something, just realize that this is often a trauma coming out, hidden trauma, hidden anger, hidden emotion. And it's just best to allow it and to watch it and to let it pass you. This is the body's natural way of releasing trauma. If you give the body what it needs, it will heal itself, not only physically, mentally, spiritually, karmically, traumatically. Sometimes a deep trauma will come up. You know, as I said, a rape is a very, very deep trauma, and it might come out for healing. It'll come out when it's ready to come out. The body's very intelligent. If it takes 2 years to come out, that's what it needed. That's the amount it needed to build energy for it to come out. Sometimes it's good to speak to a counsellor about it. So, you know, speak to someone about it. In general, speak to your practitioner, etc. But for the most part, when a trauma comes out, it just comes out randomly a lot of the time. A lot of the time people don't even understand it, you know. So don't try and put too much analysis on it, because it's confusing sometimes. The best thing to do is just speak to your practitioner. They'll often change around your supplement regime, because that's really helpful. All of a sudden you might be, you know, just plodding along on your hair analysis, and all of a sudden you'll go for a trauma release, and that might be a copper might be attached to that trauma. So your copper level will just go boom through the roof, make you feel super anxious, super paranoid, super like irritable. You know, and this is where the program needs changing. We need more sedative minerals, more things to calm down the central nervous system, etc. So that's how we deal with trauma, and it's the best way of dealing with trauma, because you're giving the body what it needs, and the body will automatically deal with trauma in its own time. Unlike, for example, things like hypnosis or regression. We don't like that sort of stuff in general, because what happens is a psychologist will go picking through, try and pick through and try and get down into this trauma when the body's not prepared for it. You know, the body's just not prepared for it. It's a little bit like, you know, you might hear about these people who go on these sort of ayahuasca retreats and, you know, plant medicine retreats, and they'll have a really bad trip. They'll have a really bad experience with it. And the body's just not ready for it. The body is not ready for that healing. It's just not ready for it. You know, I've seen times, and I'm digressing a little bit, but I've seen times where people have come back and they've been like, the plant medicine, the plants actually told me that they're not going to push me through this certain thing that I need to go through, because I'm not ready for it. I mean, you know, even the plants understand trauma better than humans do. Which is hilarious. A plant telling someone that they're not ready for this healing process because their body isn't up to scratch, you know. And that's what it's like with a lot of healing modalities these days. We try and pick into things, we try and go into it. It's the human nature of just thinking we're better than nature itself, you know, which is very, very interesting. And you know, a lot of people come to me and they'll say, yeah, you know, I had this happen to me in the past, and I've dealt with it. You know, I've had hypnotic regression, etc., etc. And quietly I will just acknowledge it, but underneath I'm thinking 100% that trauma's going to come back out because it's not been fully healed. And lo and behold, 4 months down the line, 5 months down the line, I'll get an email, get a phone call, Lewis, this is coming back up again. What's going off? I'm getting worse. I thought I'd dealt with this. And I'm like, no, you didn't deal with it. The body wasn't fully prepared to deal with it. Now you're getting the correct nourishment for the body to fully overcome it now. You know, let's change the program around. Let's maybe get you a bit of counselling. Let's talk about it. And lo and behold, the trauma comes out, it passes, toxins come out at the same time, and a person deals with the trauma. So I hope that makes sense. Very, very enlightening way of thinking about trauma. It's a new way of thinking about trauma, but all we're doing really is just handing it back to our body, putting trust and faith in the body's wisdom for dealing with all this stuff. It knows what to do. You've just got to hold its hand a little bit and give it what it needs, and the body will deal with it. If you're dealing with a trauma now that's coming up in the program, just try and watch it like clouds. A lot of the time you're not going to know where it's come from. It's just going to be random crying, random anger, random outbursts. That's just the body dealing with old trauma that you've kind of forgot about a lot of the time. So I hope that makes sense. If you want to start a nutritional balancing program, if you want to deal with all that trauma that's been hidden, that's been locked away, then feel free to send me an email, Lewis, Lewis at deephealingspace.com. Thanks for watching, guys. For people who are watching my channel a lot, check out my Patreon account. I'm going to start posting more videos on there. I'm going to start posting videos about spirituality and more metaphysical sort of stuff that I don't like posting on YouTube. A lot of things get blocked on YouTube, so I'm going to be putting them in the Patreon section. So if that's something that you're interested in, pop to Patreon and you'll start seeing some deeper aspects to how I think about spirituality, the real self, and more metaphysical sort of stuff. So alright, I'll speak to you all soon. Thanks for watching and take care.